and this important movement. I want to just give you a little bit of background before I introduce a very special person that was a part of this movement. And she's very special, and she's done some extraordinary things in her life. And I think that you'll be very interested in that. I am facing some unique obstacles myself, and I'm going to share my dilemma a little bit later with you, but I'm going to stick with this story because this story has influenced me and empowered me and inspired me so much. Because when you think about what these amazing people have done, it really gets you to think about it took a great deal of courage. It was just a short 50 years ago that African Americans faced an insurmountable odd, all kinds of odds in every area of life, and it just seems like it was impossible for them to overcome those odds. But there was a movement building in the academic halls of America's historically black colleges and universities. That movement would change America forever. If Dr. King was a drum major of justice, these young academics were the instruments that filled the air with substance and a steady rhythm to march towards equality. Their story is a great story of courage. My talk will focus on their story because their story is my story. Their story is your story. It's a great American story of courage. Courageous is the best word I use to describe the Texas Southern University students who had no idea that their one simple act would turn this nation's political, legal, and social systems inside out. On March 4th, 1960, Houston started to unravel. Piece by piece, every single political, legal, and social provision established by this nation's separate but equal disenfranchisement laws, also referenced as Jim Crow, came undone. It was out of sheer frustration and steadfast determination that these young architects of change believed America could simply be better. With a brilliant plan and an even more brilliant execution, these young visionaries showed Houston and the nation how to be better than they could have ever imagined. Inspired by the landmark February 1st, 1960 sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina, these savvy collegians set out to dismantle Houston's segregation walls. 13 students met on TSU's campus under a weathered flagpole, flying the stars and stripes as a symbol of America's founding principles. They said a prayer, lined up in pairs, and began to march to 4110 Almeida Road. They marched down Wheeler Avenue and they sang Black spirituals. More students joined them because the students were trying to figure out, why are you marching down Wheeler Avenue and why are you singing? And they said, well, we're going to Weingarten Supermarket. Why are you going to Weingarten Supermarket? You'll find out when we get there. So they all started to join in as the students were walking down Wheeler Avenue. At 4:30 p.m. on Friday afternoon, they arrived at Weingarten Supermarket. By the time they made it to Weingarten's, more students had joined them. 20 or more students were standing outside of Weingarten Supermarket. They had a very simple plan, a very simple objective, and that was to be served at a lunch counter. It's not that they wanted to eat at the lunch counter. They wanted America. They wanted Houston to realize that our Constitution said that they had the right to be there. I want to stay in this moment, and I want you to think about what it was like for those brave students who wanted Houston, who wanted this country to be better. I'm going to introduce to you now an iconic woman who played a role in leading that first sit-in, actually 54 years ago. Her name is Dr. Halcyon Sadberry Watkins, and she was one of the nation's first black female veterinarians. In fact, she was the 11th in the nation. She was the nation's 11th black veterinarian. She was a studious biology major at Texas Southern University who knew in her heart that this moment was the right time for this movement. Fierce and fearless, she did something that no one in American history even talks about. In fact, no one has ever even talked about her story. We're bringing her story to you today for the first time. Many people at Texas Southern University know the story, but we're bringing the story to you. Her story is an amazing story. It's a unique story. And Halcyon is an amazing woman. When she arrived at that lunch counter at Wine Gardens, Eldrew Stearns, who was actually the leader at the time, said to the group, "Who will go in and sit at the lunch counter?" She raised her hand, and she said, "I will." She walked in and sat on the brown padded stool at the lunch counter. Her individual story, like I said, has not been told, the details of this story until today. But I'd like to introduce her. I'd like for Dr. Watkins to join me up here. And we'll it's always such an honor for me to be around this lady. And she is just an iconic person with a wonderful spirit and a wonderful heart. But on that day, March 4th, 1960, I would just like for you to share with everyone, what was it like sitting at that counter at Wine Gardens?
Well, thank you, first of all, for recognizing that it took a lot of courage to just make the walk down to Wine Gardens. And, but I felt that this was something that had to be done from some previous experiences that I was going through. And as I sat there, I kept saying, my dad's gonna kill me. But then I kept saying, and then he's gonna be proud of me. I think he will be proud. But it was just heartwarming to be a part of such a movement. And I felt that this has got to be done. It's got to be done. When I first sat down, someone was sitting at the stool next to the one that was empty where I sat, and he proceeded to turn the cup of coffee over in my direction. The person behind the counter attempted to wipe it up, and he said no, and he made some remarks that I should wipe it up. But it was wiped up and cleaned up, and I sat there. I didn't make any motions or anything. I just sat there, as you see on the picture that was shown earlier. That's me. That's me, and my children asked me, they said, "Mom, what were you thinking?" Just as you asked. And I said, you know, like I said, I only thought about Dad. I really was afraid that he, you know, because he was a school teacher, and he had to worry about his job. And he was the breadwinner. And so I had to worry about my tuition. And it was worth it.
The one thing that many people don't realize is how involved women were in this movement. And women actually planned and were very instrumental and fearless in planning it.
Yes, Eldrew was like, I'd say Malcolm X. Eldrew was more or less our leader, but Otis, what you saw earlier, was the calmer. And he was the one that, and then we had people like Holly that kept a jovial attitude. And, you know, we had good leaders on that campus at Texas Southern University. I often think about Dr. Neighbor was the president, and he called an assembly, and he told us, he said, look, I've got property all over Georgia. I can take care of myself. I can lose my job, but I want you young people to get out there and do the right thing. And what he did, he saw the young ladies in the audience, and he told the guys, he said, you got to protect these ladies. Well, people like Holly would say, I don't need anybody to protect them. But he sort of put the embrace of we are out there together. And the young ladies felt safe. I felt safe because I knew that there were people there, and we were all there together for the same purpose. And so I felt safe about it. And I think that the young ladies that participated, we did experience. I have a scar on my knee. I was drugged across a parking lot. But this was when I had moved to St. Louis, and we were trying to get tellers in the banks in St. Louis. And I joined the demonstrations there. And we were all across a paved, it's not really paved, I guess, asphalt parking lot, and I have the scars. But it was worth that too.
And the thing that a lot of people across the nation tend to think is that Houston did nothing. Nothing happened here because the media, they actually were working behind the scenes, business leaders, to not cover what the students were doing. How did that make you guys feel?
Well, we felt like nobody saw it. And I was glad my dad didn't see it. But my aunt in Houston, she called my dad and said, you know, Hallie is sitting in. And he said, oh, please, y'all protect her. So whenever we did go back, we went to the Walgreens on Elgin, and we sat there. They moved the stools, so we stood. They moved the stools out. We went to the bus station downtown. They just closed down the whole eating facility. Then they took the seats out of the waiting room. So we sat on the floor. We said, we're going to sit here. Then each of us, there were businessmen in the city, and they raised money for us to buy tickets. They bought our tickets, and we boarded the bus. We filled the bus up from the front to the middle. We didn't go beyond the middle of the bus. And we would ride from here to maybe Prairie View, from here to maybe the bus that went down to Galveston, it wasn't on a regular schedule. So we went north, and we would go to Waco. And as we went down on those buses, the bus stations that were open, they began to close down, and people would have to stand outside. Everybody, not just the blacks, had to stand outside and wait for a bus, rather than open up the bus station. But we just got on those buses, and our tickets were paid for. And we had a return ticket back to Houston. So, and let me just interject here, we didn't miss our classes. Dr. Neighbor said, if you're going to do this and you're going to have to pay, you're going to finally get to go to those restaurants where you have to buy a bottle of wine or champagne, and you're going to be sitting there with Pepsi Cola money in your pocket. And he said, I want you guys to be well equipped and ready and know how to read a menu and know how to order and have the money in your pocket to pay. And you can only do that if you get your education. So he really pressed that on us. So we had some good leaders from that Texas Southern University. I don't know. They schooled me in more than one way. They did. Really extraordinary about your story is that you went on to graduate from Texas Southern University in 1961, and you tried initially to go to Texas A&M, and you were told a woman is never coming to this institution. Yeah. But at that time, Texas A&M was an all-male university. And I went to the veterinary school. I'm from Bryan, in Bryan College Station. So I thought that I could just go over there and apply for veterinary school. I didn't know, I really wasn't thinking about that it was an all-male college. I knew that it was, but it just didn't dawn on me that I was trying to be the first. So I went to the dean's office, and I really wanted to take some classes because at Texas Southern we didn't have a pre-vet program. So I didn't have any ag courses in my biology degree in my curriculum. So I was really trying to find out if I could take some ag courses. But the dean caught me right up front. He said, "Young lady, you think you're going to be the first woman in this school and the first one in this vet school?" I said, "You know, sir, I didn't come here with that in mind. I came here to find out if I could go to veterinary school here. You know, I want to go to veterinary school." Senator Bill Moore got wind of my request, and he wrote a brief for me to try to integrate Texas A&M. And we were on the courthouse steps, and he said, "Do you want to be a veterinarian, or do you want to be the first?" And I said, "I want to be a veterinarian." He said, "Let's drop this." And my dad was the principal of an elementary school, and he was the only school in Bryan that had an integrated faculty. One of his teachers' husband was on the faculty at Texas A&M Veterinary School. And he was a Kansas State graduate. He's told my dad, he said, "Why don't you get her to apply to Kansas State?" And I did. And I went to Kansas State. First I was taking correspondence courses to take those ag courses. And they said, "You need to come on residence on the campus." So I went to Kansas State and took two courses. One was poultry science. And we had to dress turkeys and chickens and what have you. And the guys in the lab, they just put a black apron on, and we sliced the throat and let them bleed out, and then we start, the procedure. Well, I would put on a double T-shirt and everything, so one of the young men said, "You don't have to do that." I said, "I do." And we had a few words, and it got to be a little confrontational, and I had to go to the dean's office. And the dean said, "Can you get along with these little cowboys?" I said, "No, sir." So he called the dean at Tuskegee, and that's how I went to Tuskegee. And I graduated from Tuskegee in 1968.
So I just wanted Dr. Watkins to share that story with you, because I think it's an amazing story. And the message then that you would want to leave this audience today.
Courage. Courage and dreams. Don't let anybody stop you. If that's your goal, then proceed to try to get there. There are humps in the road. But you know what? We can all hurdle. So we can jump over. It takes a lot of times to just say, "Why not?" But let's keep pushing.
I would like to remind you that the historic marker recognizing these outstanding students. And what they did on March 4th, 1960 is located at 4110 Almeida Road. Our post office is, our U.S. Post Office is there now. But at one time it was Weingarten Supermarket. And I encourage you to actually go there. I want to wrap up by saying that I face a major challenge. And I see the student movement as a powerful source of inspiration. The young men and women are a testament to the human spirit. Their courage 54 years ago made this nation better, made my future better. MD Anderson is making history with medical innovation and helping people like me become cancer-free. The young doctors that I work with remind me of the young TSU students who were willing to take risks and to make things better for us all. And I thank you.